Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are just past the midway point in the 2031 season, and the A's are doing reasonably well. We've got a 48-40 record, a 2.5 game lead in the AL West on the Mariners. We're up 4 on the Astros, 6.5 on the Angels, and 8.5 on the Rangers. Key goal for us this season is to achieve a winning record, and we are on pace to do that. We also are supposed to upgrade at center field. Luis Lara, who is not a change in center field for us, is having a respectable season for us. We're definitely not going to achieve our goal of increasing fan interest materially this year, however, and since we are on a prove-it one-year contract, feel like it's imperative that we achieve a winning record. I think if this team makes the playoffs, there's almost no chance we'll be fired. And if we achieve a winning record, we'll be going into the offseason feeling pretty good about things, despite the fact that we are likely to fail, as we often have in terms of improving fan interest with this franchise. And today is going to be an important day for the Oakland A's. We will be picking 10th in the draft that just started, so our pick is up. We highlighted at the end of the last episode some of the key players who were going to be available for us to select. And as always, sincerely appreciate all of our viewers, all of our subscribers, and all of our frequent commenters, and got some good feedback from some viewers in the comments to the last episode on which direction we should consider going in the draft with the number 10 overall pick. A bit disappointing that we're picking 10th when we won the World Series with this team a couple of years ago. Felt like we were probably done picking at the front end of the draft. Unfortunately, we regressed significantly last year, but hopefully this is our last opportunity for many years to have a top 10 pick with this Oakland A's franchise. But before we get into the draft, we've got 6 trades that we have made since the last episode to report on. As I mentioned, it's going to be critical for us to have a winning record this year. And if we're going to have a winning record, I'd certainly love to guide this team back into the playoffs. So we are very committed to doing that. I know the 6 trades sounds crazy. Honestly, none of them are really blockbusters. But I do think on the edges of our 26-man roster, these deals will help us. First is we made a trade for Orion Kerkering. He's a guy we mentioned a week or two ago. Got a updated scouting report on him, and we think he's an arm that could help us in the bullpen as a right-handed pitcher. Didn't have to give up too much. 25-year-old middling prospect in Luis Espinal, and then 29-year-old left fielder Brian Buelvis, who has been with us off and on throughout the years, but was in AAA for us. So no big commitment there, and Kerkering is already on the 26-man roster. And the reason he is that to open up the spot, we traded away Ryan Reich, who we had picked up as a Rule 5 acquisition this year. He put up a 4.40 ERA for us. Was a great influence in the clubhouse, but when we look at his ratings and his performance over his career, don't think he's as good a pitcher as Kerkering. And we reunited with an old friend, Max Muncy, in return. And we're actually going to be playing Muncy in the right field for the time being in Las Vegas to try to make him as versatile as possible if we end up needing him on the major league roster because of injuries. With the money he's making now and the fact that he's in his last option year, I don't think he's a big part of our future. But he is a guy who's versatile and should be able to perform reasonably well against left-handed pitching. So if we have some injury issues, maybe we'll see Muncy again in Oakland before the end of this season. And we also made a very similar series of 2 trades to hopefully upgrade our left-handers in the bullpen. Traded for Hagen Smith from the Atlanta Braves. He's a guy with excellent stuff. He's actually got the stamina and the arsenal to start. His control has been an issue, but has a sub-4 ERA primarily out of the bullpen for Atlanta this year. He is a guy who is going to be a free agent after this season. The Braves retain most of his modest contract. Had to give up more to bring him on board, but think he will still be an upgraded left-handed arm in our bullpen. Had to give up Christian Scott, 32-year-old. He was just a guy who was in our minor league organization in AAA on a minor league contract. So although he's a useful player, he's not as good in my view as Mr. Hagen. But we finally bailed on Chris Livonis, who is a guy who we picked in the second round in 2024 in our first draft with this team. Now a 25-year-old. He put up a 4.12 ERA and a 7-2 record in AAA Las Vegas for us this year. He is a good influence in the clubhouse. He's got enough stamina and enough pitches to start if need be. Don't think he's ever going to be a top-end player. You can see his ceiling is only 2 stars, according to our scout, but still a guy that we've invested heavily in over the years, but we needed to give him up to bring Hagen Smith on for rental. I don't think Livonis is going to pitch so well going forward that we're going to regret this significantly, but certainly we're a rental on Hagen Smith. I don't know that we'd be spending $6 million a year on him if we're going to use him as a lefty out of the bullpen, but felt like he improved our team, and to open up the spot for him, we traded away Jose Hernandez, former Rule 5 pick of ours, who had been a left-handed specialist out of the bullpen for us for the last season and a half, had not really done particularly well for us, even though he throws in the high 90s. So trading him away opened up the roster spot for Hagen. Had to give up minor league outfielder Dane Myers. We got minor league outfielder Dane Myers. And we also got a 23-year-old right-handed pitcher, Jabari Conte, in return. Only a reliever with just a 2-pitch arsenal. Don't see him being a big part of our future, but at least we got something back. We opened up a spot on the 26-man roster and got Hernandez contract off the books. We also have traded away our backup catcher, Ryan Jeffers. We brought him up on a minor league contract that turned into a major league contract when we promoted him right before the season started. But he only hit a $155 for us in 103 at-bats, playing primarily against left-handed pitching, was well below replacement level, so we're going to go in another direction for backup catcher. And we reunited with a familiar name, 31-year-old center fielder Denzel Clark, who was in our organization at the start of this playthrough, moved on from him relatively quickly. Another guy who's really just insurance for us. We've talked a lot about center field and how fragile Luis Lara is. If we have some issues with Lara's health, Clark is certainly competent as a defensive center fielder, although he's never hit particularly well in the majors, with a 77 WRC plus over the course of his career. Looking back, he was in our organization until following the 2024 season when we traded him away to the Pittsburgh organization. Not a huge move, but at least it's a guy who's similar to Max Muncy, could be useful to us this year if we have a bunch of injuries, and Jeffers was not a big part of our future. So to replace Jeffers, we promoted Jake Rogers, who we had signed to a minor league deal back in February. He was our starting catcher in AAA, where he batted only .200. Not expecting much from him financially, but he is a very good defensive catcher, and since this team is kind of built around pitching and defense, hope that he'll be helpful there. Also a very good influence in the clubhouse. We're going to go with Drake Baldwin as our everyday catcher now against both righties and lefties. Rogers is going to be purely a backup. As I said, we were getting a 155 batting average from our previous backup catcher, who's not as good defensively as Rogers. Although Rogers, I don't think, is going to magically turn into a very productive major league hitter. I think he can probably hit a $155 for us, and he'll give us some better defense and a better influence in the clubhouse. Certainly would love if there was an opportunity over the next 3 weeks to potentially upgrade at backup catcher, but for the time being, the veteran Rogers has the job. So I know what you're thinking here. 5 trades, old school, and all you did was make a small upgrade in a right-handed arm in the bullpen, a small upgrade in a left-handed arm in the bullpen, and you traded away a backup catcher and replaced him with a replacement level guy. Not all that exciting. I agree, and I believe I started off by saying none of these trades were blockbusters. The last one that we haven't talked about is the most significant, though, potentially. And we picked up the veteran shortstop Royce Lewis in a trade. He's been having a rough year for Seattle with an 86 WRC plus, a WAR of less than 1. He's certainly not a shortstop anymore with these ratings, but has a bat that we think can at least be respectable, and we need a respectable bat in our infield. He's making $23.2 million this year, but the Mariners ultimately retained the vast majority of that contract, which is helpful to us. The issue is that we kind of want him to play second base or a corner outfield spot, and we were hoping, given that he does have option years left, he might be willing to go to AAA for a few weeks to try to learn those positions. Unfortunately, he refused that assignment. So we are making him our everyday second baseman right now. To get room for him on the roster, we sent down our middle infielder, Arakawa, who was playing second base for us against right-handed pitching. I'll talk about why we did that shortly. But we're going to have Royce Lewis at the age of 32 trying to learn how to play second base at the major league level, which is likely to lead to some errors over these next few weeks, and also may cost us a game or two, which, given that we're so committed to getting to a winning record and getting to this team to the playoffs, is a risky proposition. But it's a move that I felt like we had to make. To bring him on board as a rental, had to give away a few players that were more interesting to me. Some kind of 4A guys, Jake Fraley, Mason Englert, and Isaac Pacheco, all useful guys potentially, but no one who had a huge role for us. But we also to give away Bobby Holloway, who's a guy we picked up in a trade about a year and a half ago. Actually might have even been less than that. When did we pick him up in a trade originally? Oh, just the beginning of this past offseason. So, yeah, much less than a year ago. Just in November. Picked him up in the Caden Dana trade when we traded away Lawrence Butler and others. Thought he could be a useful left-handed arm. He is a guy who can start or relief, but he's 25 years old. He's fragile. I don't think he's a big part of our future, but he's at least a worthwhile prospect. And then the 23-year-old, another left-handed pitcher, Doug Arthur, guy who looks like he might be a useful left-handed reliever down the line. So didn't feel like we had to give up anyone who was a huge part of our future. Honestly, Mason Englert, who was a guy who we picked up as a minor league free agent this year and had done well for us in Double-A, might be the most useful immediately. It's a pure rental. Seattle's going to have some of these players going forward, most notably Holloway and Arthur, while we'll obviously be moving on from Lewis at the end of this year. but we had gotten so little offensive production from Arakawa at second base that we felt that bringing Lewis on board, even though he's only hitting .218 this year, made sense, as he does have 11 homers and 40 ribbies on the season. And moving to Mr. Arakawa, who still has minor league options, he had put up just a 65 WRC plus for us this year, had been above replacement level, but we're going to play him at third base down in Las Vegas to try to make him as versatile for us defensively as possible. So we'll make the most use of his time down in AAA. I think that ultimately the plan is to bring Arakawa back, and I think that ultimately Gleyber Torres is the one who's going to lose his roster spot because Lewis is on the team. But because Arakawa had options and because we wanted to make Arakawa as diverse as possible defensively, we're keeping Gleyber Torres on the team for the time being. But he has actually lost his spot in the starting lineup, even against left-handed pitching, because we put Royce Lewis in at second base and then pivoted a bunch of other guys' positions around. LeBron moved from second to first. Diane Jorge moved from first to left field, which is where Torres had been playing, and Torres go to the bench. So maybe he'll hit a little more going forward, but in the meantime, he's not going to be getting a ton of playing time for us over the next several weeks. And by the time we're ready to bring Arakawa back up, or perhaps even bring a Jake Ortega up, Torres is an obvious guy that we may look to move on from. So as I mentioned, it's definitely risky to have a guy learning how to play an important defensive position at the major league level. That said, Royce Lewis is a guy who's been a major league infielder for the better part of a decade, an established shortstop / third baseman. I think he will get up the curve relatively quickly. The issue is how much pain we have defensively while he's kind of learning how to play the position at the major league level. So not a perfect solution, but the thought is that he should certainly give us more offense than we were getting from Arakawa. And if we have to deal with a few errors along the way, we will. So those are the results of the 6 trades that I talked about at the start of the episode, and we are still figuring out what to do with Jake Ortega. I know viewers have mentioned it's probably time to bring him up, and I can't say I disagree with that because he certainly doesn't have much left to prove in AAA. That said, when I look at his bat, I don't know that it's the be-all and the end-all to jumpstart this offense. Probably going to wait for the next 3 weeks and see if maybe a higher-end hitter ends up loosening up from some other team as we get closer to the trade deadline. But in the event that we don't have that occur, and right now it doesn't look like there's any real high-end outfielders who are going to be available as we approach the trade deadline, Ortega on August 1st is a legitimate possibility to be up here. I don't think he's going to magically jumpstart this offense, but I also don't think he can necessarily do much worse than some of the offense that we've gotten this year from the likes of Torres and Gonzalez and DeLauder in the outfield. So we're not going to see Ortega quite yet, who we drafted 2 years ago today, but he's probably not too far off. And I mentioned that our loyal viewers and commenters came through with some good advice for us once again ahead of this draft following our last episode. And with talk about the trades that we've done complete, it's time to turn our attention to what we're going to do with this 10th overall pick in the draft. A few guys that we are looking at, and I'll kind of talk through what some of the viewers thought and what I'm thinking over the next few minutes. There's two pitchers that I'm considering in the first round. One is Jordan Pullen. If I go with a high schooler, I think I'm going to go with him. 18 years old, already throws in the mid to high 90s, ground ball tendencies. He's got a potential 5-pitch arsenal if everything works out. Good stamina, excellent at holding on runners. And if he completely develops, his stuff and his control are well above average, and the movement on his pitches is acceptable. So I think he's a good prospect. Again, if I was going to go with a high schooler, I'd go with Ghost Runner Pullen. But he's definitely not going to be the pick. In the mock draft, he goes with the 7th pick in the second round. We, of course, have the 10th pick in the second round. So I don't think he's going to last until we pick in the second round. But if he does, I think I'd really like the value there. So if we do go with the starting pitcher at number 10, it's going to be Kevin Patterson, the college junior. And this is a guy that several of you liked but didn't love. Fake name, the notorious KEV, Holdor. I'll mention Patterson as a guy to consider if we went with a pitcher. And I agree with that. He's a college guy out of the University of California, potentially a 4 to 5 pitch arsenal. Good stamina, good at holding on runners, high work ethic. I think his movement and particularly his control could be above average. The stuff only average, but with that 5-pitch arsenal, I think we could certainly get him into a development lab program to work on some of his secondary pitches and ultimately maybe even bump that stuff up to a 55 if everything went well. So I think he's a guy who will almost certainly be a useful major league pitcher. I don't view him as an ace right now at the top of his potential. If he reaches his full potential, I think he's probably a great 4, a nice 3. If we're able to get his stuff a little better, maybe he becomes a solid 2 starter if we get really lucky with him. Don't love that he only throws in the low 90s, but he is a ground baller pitcher type, ground ball tendencies. Only looking for $7 million, so a little less than some of the other guys that we're going to talk about. If we go with a pitcher in the first round, it's going to be Patterson. He's projected to go with the 31st pick in the first round. So 10th overall is a bit of a reach according to the experts. But considering that there's 5 supplemental first-round picks after the 31st pick when he's supposedly going to be taken, plus 9 more picks till we're going to be picking in the second round, if we want Patterson, we would clearly need to pick him right now. So we know if we go with a pitcher 10th overall, it's going to be Patterson, but there's 6 position players that we or the viewers are interested in. I'll start off with one that we're definitely not going to take 10th overall, and that's Garrett Baristo. He's Holdor's selection. The notorious KEV and Sam M also liked Baristo. The main reason I'm not going to go with him is that he's not projected to go in the first 5 rounds of the draft. I think that the other teams are really downgrading the poor competition level that he faced in Canada. And honestly, over my years of OOTP experience, have definitely had mixed results, primarily not that great with Canadian players who had faced a poor competition level in high school. Looking at the OSA ratings, they're definitely not as high on him as our new head scout is. I trust our head scout better or more. But given that I think we've got some time with Baristo and he'd be much better value as a third, fourth, maybe even a fifth round pick than he would be as a first. Although I'm intrigued by the center fielder, he's not a guy that I'm going to go with. Similarly, I like Nate Bennett, the shortstop. I mentioned him at the end of the last episode. Really like the glove, decent speed, and a bat that looks like it could be pretty useful. Bennett is a guy who's liked by Fake Name and Hold Door, but not necessarily on the top of either of their lists, and he's not on the top of my list either. He's projected to go with the third pick in the third round, so I feel pretty comfortable that Bennett will be around with our second round pick if we want him, and he could be a really nice option for us there. Now, the other four guys that I'm going to talk about are guys we most likely are going to need to pick right now if we want to guarantee that we have them. Obviously, if we want to guarantee that we have them, we need to pick them right now. Dusty Stevenson is a shortstop that we like. Kevin McDowell also likes him. The glove is not incredible. Do like the high adaptability and work ethic, and think that he's got one of the better bats of all of these middle infielders that we're going to be talking about. He's projected to go with the 20th pick in the second round. So if everything goes to according to form, we could have an option of Stevenson, Bennett, or Baristo available to us with our second round pick. So I kind of like holding off on Stevenson for now. But the three guys who are left are all projected to go before our next pick. So these are the guys that we need to think about the most seriously. One that wasn't really noted by the viewers that I'm still interested in is the catcher Kevin Cleary. He's projected to go with the fifth pick in the second round. So it's not inconceivable that he could fall to us 5 picks later. Really like his defense, like the high adaptability and work ethic, and he's a catcher with potentially exceptional home run power who's going to draw some walks. Making contact is the issue for him, but if he somehow does fall a little later than anticipated to us in the second round, he's someone that I would certainly think about seriously taking then. But he's not going to be our pick at number 10. These last two guys that I'm going to talk about are in the mix for that pick, however. Another middle infielder, Luis Coronado, is a guy that both Kevin McDowell and Fake Name liked. Didn't necessarily love, but liked, and I'm kind of in a similar situation with him. He's projected to go with a supplemental first-round pick, so pretty unlikely that he's going to be available for us with the 10th pick in the second round. Really like his glove as an infielder. I think he could be a gold glove type third baseman, and he could also be a more than competent second baseman or shortstop with these ratings. He's got above average speed, and his contact and power both could be well above average to mix in with above average gap power and eye if he completely develops. You can see he's already 30 everywhere, so he doesn't have any glaring weaknesses in his game. Pretty interesting prospect at shortstop as far as I'm concerned, and given that he's expected to go with a supplemental first round pick, if I want him, I've got to take him now. I think he's probably, among all of the middle infielders that we're going to talk about, the best combination of a solid glove with a solid bat. Some of the other guys are a little more one-dimensional than Coronado. Dusty Stevenson, who we talked about, is more the bat, but the glove is kind of meh. Nate Bennett is also pretty well balanced. I don't think his bat is quite as high-end as Coronado's. Bennett, as we can see in a best-case scenario, his average power, average gap power, and an average eye, whereas Coronado we think can be a little bit above average in those and also have a little more power than Bennett, although his contact is not quite as good. And then the last guy we're going to talk about is the top prospect on the board. Another middle infielder, more of a bat than a glove. Does have the 60 infield range, but you can see his other ratings are pretty around average. And that's Shiloh Souls, who was projected to go 6th overall. So the fact that he's still sitting for us, potentially to grab here with the 10th pick, is interesting. He was the most popular with the viewers. He was the number one choice of Kevin McDowell, fake name, the notorious KEV, Jarek Braxton, and Sam M. And it's hard for me to disagree with that assessment. I think he's the best player on paper. Decent speed, although he's not a particularly adept base runner or bunter. Probably has the most positive personality traits of any of the players that we're talking about here. 10th overall. Contact is going to be excellent if he fully develops, and we think his gap power, his home run power, and his eye could all be above average as well. Got a lot of work to do with the home run power, but he's only 18 years old. The glove is not exceptional. I think he probably ends up playing second base in a perfect world. I'd like to have someone better defensively than him at second base. Certainly the turn double play rating I'd like to be higher. And in a perfect world, I'd like the range and the error and honestly even the arm to be better, but we can kind of live with that below average arm at second. But the thought would be that if his bat fully develops, that should more than overcome the fact that he's probably a league average second baseman defensively, maybe even a little bit worse. He is a potential switch hitter. So I agree with the viewers that Solis is the best prospect out there. And our scout would say the same thing. He's a 5-star guy. Recommends bringing him on board. We've got enough money in the budget this year that $2 million over slot is not scary to us at all. And given that there is some admittedly low, but there's some chance that Coronado could fall to the second round. If we go with a position player, I feel like it does have to be Solis. The question for me, though, is do we go with the high school player Solis here in the first round? Or do we go with the college pitcher Kevin Patterson? Because Patterson's projected to go 31st overall. I think it's very unlikely that 15 picks later, after the supplemental first rounders and the second round picks, he'll still be around. So if we pass on Patterson, I think it's very likely that if we go with Solis, we end up going with a Stevenson or a Bennett in the second round, and we go back-to-back with middle infielders. I'd love to get a pitcher with Solis, but as I talked about, both Patterson and Pullen are expected to go off the board before our next pick. So there's a part of me that says, although I like Solis the best, do I take Patterson right now with the expectation that I'm going to get a chance at Bennett, Stevenson, maybe even Coronado in the second round if I pass on Solis, to get a little more diversification in the players that I bring on board. I'd like to bring on a high-end pitching prospect this year, but it feels to me like it's a little bit of a reach to pick Patterson or Pullen 10th overall. But the thought is if I don't pick one of them 10th overall, it's probably a 10 to 15% chance that one of them is still on the board in the second round. So that's the dilemma for me. But ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to go with the player that we think is the highest ceiling here, and that's Shiloh Solis. He was also the one that our scouting team was most high on, both in terms of our in-game scout and, more importantly, our scouting department from around the world via our commenters. He's a pretty clean prospect, a lot of positive personality traits. As I mentioned, I don't love the defense. He could also play left field, but that arm is just not going to be good in the outfield. But the 70 contact potential combined with all of the other key hitting ratings, likely to be above average if he reaches his full potential, makes me think he's the right guy to go with. If we go with a second baseman followed by a shortstop in the first 2 rounds of this draft, we're probably ultimately going to only hit on one of those guys anyways if we're lucky. So I don't love the fact that we're going to probably be waiting until the 3rd or 4th round for a pitcher, because I think that's still an area in our farm system where we could use some help. But I just don't see the value there at number 10 overall, even for Patterson. So we are going to go ahead and draft Shiloh Solis here with the 10th pick in the draft. And as I said, I'm expecting to see Bennett, Baristo, probably Stevenson still on the board when we pick next in the 2nd round. And who knows? Cleary and Coronado are possible to see on the board as well. I don't think we're going to see Patterson or Pullen, but you never know. So Baristo is still there, and Coronado is still there. That's the one that was a bit of a surprise. It looks like Stevenson ended up going, and the catcher Cleary went. But Coronado, who was a supplemental 1st-round pick in the mock draft, is still on the board. So between Coronado, Bennett, and Baristo, there's 3 guys that I really like here in the 2nd round. The question is whether either of the pitchers that I really liked magically fell to us. And it does not look like that was the case. The top pitchers have all come off the board. So I've looked at some of these guys offline. There's no one that I'm particularly thrilled with. So we're going to have an interesting decision. Baristo we're not going to take yet. As I mentioned, he wasn't projected to go in the top 5 rounds of the draft, so we're going to be patient with him. But it's a matter of Coronado or Bennett here. Coronado will be well above slot. Bennett will be well below slot, but we've got enough money in the budget this year that that's not going to be an issue for us. Coronado, really like the glove, like the speed, like the defensive versatility, and we think that the bat could be very good, above average at everything with 60 contact, 65 power, 55 gap, and 55 eye if everything works out. But I like Bennett a lot as well. 65 contact, so he's a little better there. A little weaker in terms of the gap power, the home run power, and the eye. Probably better defensively, though, and a little more well-rounded in terms of his speed. I definitely like both of these guys. Bennett, as I mentioned, was projected to go at the top of the 3rd round in the mock draft, so it's not inconceivable that he might fall to our pick, which will be depending on how many picks there are in the 3rd round. Yeah, our pick is only 2 later than he was projected to go in the 3rd round. So there is a part of me that says try to be real greedy. You go with Coronado now, and there's some chance that Bennett will still be there in the third round, in which case we end up going second base, shortstop with our first 3 picks. But again, we're not going to hit on all of these guys. And if we were able to do that, it probably guarantees that we brought a guy who 5 or 6 years from now is going to be a pretty good middle infielder into our organization. Just don't know exactly which guy it would be. Our scouting director is actually recommending the Canadian Baristo, and certainly that bat is tempting. More of a corner outfielder than a center fielder, but I don't think the other teams are as high on him. I think the poor competition will scare people off, so I think we probably maybe can be a little more patient with him. I'm going to roll the dice and try to turn this into a monster draft. I don't think Coronado is available for us in the third round. It's probably a coin flip, maybe even a little worse than a coin flip, whether Bennett will be. But there is a chance that he will be. Although Bennett's better with the contact, and we like his glove a little bit better. Coronado seems to be a notch better in gap power, home run power, and eye. It still is more than competent defensively. And it's really just a play on the psychology of the draft and how other teams are going to value players. If we go with Coronado now, there's a chance that we also get Bennett. If we go with Bennett now, I don't think there's any way we get Coronado. So we're going to go with Coronado here in the second round. And Bennett and Baristo are both still on the board in the third round. So the gamble may have paid off. I'm going to take a look now at just who's available pitcher-wise, as well as some of these other position players. But I think Nate Bennett in the third round is really nice value. Again, I don't love that we're going middle infield with the first 3 picks, but I think that we would have reached for one of those pitchers. I mean, in retrospect now, with the fact that Coronado was available in the second and Bennett was available in the third, if I had perfect foresight and knew that was going to happen, would that have encouraged me to take Patterson with the first pick? I think it's possible that I would have done that if I had known this was going to be the case, but certainly didn't feel it was guaranteed that that would happen. And the pitchers who are available right now aren't as interesting to me as Nate Bennett. So we're going to go ahead and grab him in the third round and then hope Baristo is still around in the fourth. And he is. So there's not a lot of interest in him. I'm going to still investigate further. I think there's still a chance Baristo falls to us in the fifth. So do I roll the dice? Or is it time to finally bring him on board? But with Souls, Coronado, and Bennett in the first 3 rounds, I like the way the draft's broken for us thus far. And although with the fact that Baristo didn't show up in the first 5 rounds of the mock draft, there's an argument to keep pushing the envelope. I don't love any of the pitchers that are available right now. I don't love any of the other hitters are available. I certainly don't think it's guaranteed that Baristo develops to become the guy that we think he can. But I do trust our scout more than the OSA, so I think there's probably more upside here than others are believing. And as a 4th round pick, I think there's a lot of value for Garrett Baristo. So we are going to go with him in the 4th. And now a 5th round selection is on the board for us. And while I'd love to go with a pitcher after 4 consecutive position players, Just don't really see much value there. So we're going to go with another middle infielder here in the 5th round. Older prospect shortstop Steve Allison, 21 years old, out of Baylor. Durable, nice glove, high work ethic. Question how much the bat is going to develop, given that he's almost 22 years old. But if that bat does develop, he is a useful major league infielder. If the bat completely develops, he's arguably a starting good major league infielder. So for a 5th-round pick, someone who's further along than the rest of the guys that we've picked in this draft, I think Steve Allison is pretty good value. We will let you know if we do anything else that's real interesting over these next 15 rounds of the draft. But as we sit here a quarter of a way through the draft, love the way the first 3 rounds went with Solis, Coronado, and Bennett. Getting Garrett Baristo in the 4th is great value. And then guy who is a pretty high floor, who certainly will be helping us in the minors and helping those around him develop, play some good defense at short for us over the next few years in Steve Allison. And as I said, if he fully develops to where we think his potential is with that glove, he's pretty good value as a 5th-round pick, especially for a guy who's not looking for too much money. There are a couple impossible-to-sign pitchers that might be available. If any of them are still on the board in the 6th, 7th round and we decide to go that way, I will let you know. And one of the impossible-to-sign pitchers I has mentioned is still here in the 6th round, and I think it's time to take a flyer on him at least. Typically, that impossible to sign is a massive amount of money, but sometimes it is less than you think it might be, particularly if you wait until late August, early September. So in the 6th round, we're going to take a flyer on Alvaro Romo. Think he could be a useful major league pitcher as a starter if he completely develops. Tend to think he's going to end up going to Colorado State University Pueblo rather than signing with us. But as a 6th-round pick, it's worth a flyer as far as I'm concerned. And here in the 7th round, back to a middle infielder that we've had our eye on for the last few rounds, and that's second baseman Brad Penny. Not much defensively, but he does have a high work ethic, and he does have a bat that could be useful if he fully develops. Durable as far as his injury proneness, and could also probably be a left fielder if we really didn't care about defense. It's 6'5". His future is probably at first base, and if the bat develops to the extent we think it could, he could actually be a useful first baseman down the line. But no guarantees that he'll get there. But as a 7th-round pick, I think there's good value in Mr. Penny. And not anyone all that interesting over the last dozen or so rounds of the draft. Jonathan Schmidt, a third baseman that we did bring on board, is looking for more than normal, but with potentially 70 contact and 60 power, certainly willing to give him that. The starting pitching prospect, Romo, says he's looking for a bonus significantly over $10 million, so that's not a number that we can hit today, but we will see how the next few months go, and maybe we'll engage with him in late August, early September. It's possible the amount of money we have available might be different after we make some trades. If we make the type of trades that we need to be making as a win-now team, the amount of money available will probably be less than it is today, but you never know how these trades will work out and how the market will end up looking. And as we look back on the draft, maybe taking Kevin Patterson at 10th overall wouldn't have been much of a reach, because he did end up going 12th to the Marlins, and then Jordan Pullen went 21st to the Brewers. So there was definitely no chance that either of those players were going to drop to us in the second round. They both went far earlier than estimated, is we talked about. I felt like we were definitely going to be able to get a middle infielder that we liked in the second round. Didn't necessarily think it would be Coronado there, but thought that Bennett would be there for sure. If, as I said, I had known we'd be able to get Coronado and Bennett in the second and third rounds, probably would have went with Patterson instead of Solis in the first, just because I do like to kind of get a balance between pitchers and position players in the draft when at all possible. And this year, it's conceivable that we're not going to have a single pitcher that we end up signing in our top 8 picks of the draft. But Solis, on paper, was the best player available, the highest ceiling of anyone available, according to our scout. OSA doesn't like him quite as much, but again, I trust our scout. Solis also with one of the best personalities of anyone who was available in the draft. So no crying over spilled milk. Didn't work out perfectly, but still really like the 3 middle infielders and the center fielder that we got in the first 4 rounds of the draft. Next time around, we'll play through the trade deadline. I do feel like we made a little bit of progress with the moves that we've made, but still hoping that a few more interesting players become available or have their prices come down over these next 3 weeks until the trade deadline. Like what we've done with the pitching staff, adding in the left-handed pitcher and the right-handed pitcher that we did for our bullpen. Hope that ultimately Royce Lewis learns how to play second base and gives us a little more offense than we've been getting from that position, because we certainly need some offensive help as we sit here on July 11th, just about a week and a half before the All-Star break. Colt Keith has 9 more home runs than the guys who are second and third on the team in that category. And Colt Keith has 17 more runs batted in than the guys who are second and third on the team in that category. So it has been a very Colt Keith-centric season. 302 average, 29 homers, 90 ribbies, 169 WRC plus, and a 3.7 WAR. He is certainly, as we sit here on July 11th, a very strong candidate for American League MVP, leading the league in homers and ribbies, second in OPS. Jackson Ferris and Chase Burns are second and third in the league in ERA, and Chase Lee is tied for the league lead in saves with Emmanuel Clase, who is now a member of the New York Yankees. So all in all, pleased with the draft. Not going to kick myself over Patterson because I didn't know the draft was going to turn out the way that he did, and I just felt like Solis had the highest floor, or not the highest floor, the highest ceiling of anyone who was available. So we went with him. Maybe there will be a real interesting pitcher in the IAFA pool next year. If not, hopefully there will be a couple of interesting pitchers we can take in the early rounds of the draft to supplement the farm system. And thinking about that farm system that ranks 8th overall, Jaheim Pennyman, still in high A ball, probably will promote him to Double A at the end of the month. He's our top starting pitching prospect, 63rd overall. We also, in the top 200 prospects, also have Joe Lewin and Josh Mangano as well. Mangano we just promoted to A ball for the first time. Lewin, who was our supplemental first-round pick a year ago, is still in rookie ball, only 18 years old. But we do have 3 pitchers among the top 200 prospects in baseball, so the cupboard is not completely bare with the pitchers, but again, didn't quite get the balance this year that we would have hoped for. But it's all not about one draft. It's about building the best organization, bringing in the best talent possible, and if we need to be trading away some middle infielders in a few years for some pitching help, we'll probably have the horses to do that. So we'll find out how the next 3 months of July go in our next episode. Probably have another trade or two if all goes well. And hopefully we can position these A's to have a winning record this year, make the playoffs this year, and with the talent that we brought into the organization and the talent that's on the way, hopefully position this team to be a consistent competitor, even though we still have the lowest budget and the lowest payroll in all of baseball. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.